Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
The football boot industry has brainwashed the average consumer into believing that new designs and new technologies always result in a better overall product. And if you've seen any of my content on the Speedportal, as much as I like certain things about them, I think it's a really hard argument to suggest that these aren't a step backwards when compared to the speed flows that they replace. And to add insult to injury, right alongside the new Speedportals, Adidas dropped remakes of the 2014 F50 Adizero in this gorgeous battle pack colorway as part of the Speed Legacy pack. This upper hybrid touch from 8 years ago as an overall package fits, feels, and performs significantly better than their current inline speed boot. But it gets even worse because there's a second part to this pack, and that is the leather upper variation of the 2014 F50 Adizero, which, just like the synthetic model, I would argue is better than the current Speedportal, and also unfortunately sold out. And keeping in mind that this is a limited edition release, selling out isn't necessarily the biggest achievement in the world. However, when you factor in that these retailed for $280, which is quite expensive, and the fact that it's such a simple design as far as football boots go, certainly in regards to how it's constructed and the materials used, I think it does say something about what people actually want versus what Adidas as a brand, and a lot of big football boot brands for that matter, are pushing on consumers. Is simplicity actually better? In the case of this particular football boot compared to the new Speedportals, I would argue yes. While this is technically being labeled as a remake, I would almost classify it as more of a tribute to the leather 2014 F50 in that this specification was never actually released to the public, and I would say more closely mimics what a lot of pros had on their feet as custom variations at the time, in that the leather at the front doesn't feature any stitching. Instead, it's just reinforced by a liner, and then you have this embossed battle pack graphic, which just looks really cool. And even the synthetic part through the midfoot is a different type of synthetic leather than we saw on any of the different colorway releases, where they did vary up that material quite a bit from one colorway to the next. Even the tongue itself isn't made from leather. It's a synthetic material that overall works extremely well. This is a pair of football boots that you put on your feet, and even though they're in the speed category and have the same sole plate as the now discontinued Speedflow speed boots, you put them on and immediately are reminded of how comfortable a pair of football boots can be, something that I think we really lose sight of with all these modern speed boots, in that they're super thin, they're super slim, they have no softness, no padding to them whatsoever, where this is kind of the exact opposite, but still feels incredibly good, if not better. I don't want to call this a low-tech football boot per se, because obviously you have the modern speed frame with the carbon fiber insert, which I think is a really useful and impactful piece of technology in terms of the experience of wearing this football boot. But the upper, with leather at the front and a fairly simple synthetic leather through the midfoot, with a standalone tongue and a central lacing system, by today's standards, is quite simple. Now, for those that have followed the channel for a long time, you know that I was team synthetic over team leather when it came to this generation of F50, and for the most part that remains the case. I think that hybrid touch upper on the other part of this pack is just so special, but I do like this particular variation of a 2014 F50 with a leather upper, in that the synthetic material, rather than being that super thin and rigid kind of plasticky feeling speed foil material that we got on some colorways from this generation of F50, they've gone for this softer synthetic leather material that is admittedly thinner and less padded than what you're going to get from the plush soft leather here through the forefoot and toe box area. But because it does have some leather-like qualities to it, the boots have better flow than a lot of the OG 2014 leather F50s did back in the day. Nonetheless, the leather you're going to find at the front is not the most premium, especially when you consider the $280 price tag. It's not kangaroo leather because Adidas doesn't specify what type of leather it is, and I can only assume that if it were in fact K leather, they would have told us that it is. Nonetheless, because it doesn't have stitching like the OGs, it does have a little bit of a different feel, firmer out of the box than I think most people would expect, because the boots as a whole just look really soft, but once you wear them in after 5 minutes or so, they soften up incredibly well and just feel quite good. Obviously the leather is just focused to the forefoot and toe box area, but again, because of the material they've used through the midfoot, the boot has a nice flow to it, and it does have that leather-like feel to it while still maintaining that speed boot aesthetic and certainly the lightweight kind of secure feel on your foot. It is refreshing to have a central lacing system with a standalone tongue with a low cut design. Putting these on is so simple, tying them up is so simple, taking them off is so simple. It really makes me wonder why the entire industry has trended towards these one-piece uppers. Not that some of them don't feel great, but something like this, so classic, I think just still feels really, really good. Plenty of adjustability because of this central lacing system, and the low cut design feels really nice. Very standard. A soft microfiber lining through the heel and a little bit of extra padding at the back, which just feels very, very comfortable and holds your heel in place. This lining is much better than the hybrid touch variation that they released as a part of this pack. And then as far as the insole is concerned, that is fully removable, and it's pretty much what you're going to find from the Speedflow, in that it's this mesh liner on the surface, your X and F50 branding there on the heel, and then a single layer of this white perforated foam. And then as a base, something that you guys are probably all pretty familiar with at this point, the speed frame outsole with the Carbitex insert. It provides this snapback effect unlike any other football boot, with the FG stud pattern that's super aggressive, and the rounded heel counter attached to the sole plate, which really closely mimics what you found on the 2014 F50, which really allows this to have a very similar shape, fit, and feel to the OG. It's definitely not as light, but what I will argue is that this sole plate feels significantly better. And then there's the weight, where, like I mentioned at the start of the video, we've been brainwashed into believing that new technology makes for a better product. And if you compare the look of this upper to the look of this old school chunky leather upper, I think most people are going to assume that this is lighter. But is it actually? Both in the same size, 9.5 US. We'll start off with the Speedportal 0.1. You can see that they weigh in at 7.05 ounces, the equivalent of 200 grams exactly. Change the scale back to ounces, and we'll throw on this leather F50 remake, an 8-year-old design with some tweaking, of course, 6.85 ounces, the equivalent of 194 grams. So it's only a weight difference of 6 grams, but it's in favor of what is technically an old school, very simple material and design. To make a long story short, looks and marketing can be very deceptive. On feet, this leather F50 remake just feels fantastic. The leather through the forefoot and toe box area is soft against your toes. It moves nicely with the bend of your foot. The synthetic material through the midfoot works extremely well in terms of being pliable without squeezing your feet, but also providing good lockdown with the laces tied tight, plenty of adjustability with that deep central lacing system, and the lockdown and general comfort through the heel is also top notch. When you pair that up with the speed frame from the Speedflow, you just end up with a football boot that doesn't feel like it has an upper that came out technically 8 years ago. This feels like something that they could release today, would perform with the best of the best, and I would argue is better than what they are currently offering with their Speedportal option. As far as width is concerned, they have plenty of width to them. Again, lots of adjustability with that more traditional construction method and having that standalone tongue. So even if you did have wider feet, these are going to work really well. Something that so many people loved about the leather F50s back in the day. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you're looking to order a pair for yourself, unfortunately they're sold out, but if you do manage to get a hold of a pair, they do run true to size. So in conclusion, huge props to Adidas. I think these are amazing football boots, and if you manage to get a hold of a pair, I think you're going to be really happy with them. However, in the grand scheme of old versus new, canceling out the sole plates because they effectively have the exact same technologies and feel very similar, if we're just comparing uppers from the latest and greatest to two designs that are now 8 years old, I hate to say it, but the old ones are significantly better.